Hey everybody, Asher here. Today we're taking a look at Halls of Torment. If it looks a bit like Diablo, you shouldn't necessarily be mistaken here. We're going to be playing as an archer, and if you've played any of these kind of, what's the best way to put it here, shoot 'em ups or like reverse shoot 'em ups, or it is literally, well, you should know by now. We're just going to go in here. We have the Haunted Caverns, and we actually have the Ember Grounds as well. Why not? Let's start here. We're going to have things shooting at us, and it's all very exciting and on fire. I don't necessarily know about the keyboard controls. There was an update that just got released today that said, you know, we're going to allow for mouse-only controls. But right now, as an archer, I'm doing a terrible job keeping things at range. So that's a good start. Yeah, Vampire Survivors. That's the name of the game I was thinking of. Oh, wow. How can I forget that game? It's like one of the most popular games in recent memory. Anyway, here we are, Diablo 4. As you can see, the Monster Wave DLC pack working out really well right now, as we've chosen a class that may not even be in the original game. I just ate a carrot, and now I can do pickup range, block strength, attack speed, or base health. We got to go with attack speed here. So there we go. Wow, another level. Huh. But yeah, this is a much more fight the minions of hell style Vampires the Survivor games, which is interesting because it's kind of already what Vampire Survivors was, except for a milk factory. But hey, that's the way it rolls here. So as you know, this is sort of the part of the channel where sometimes I just take a look at things that have caught my eye or caught my interest. This one caught my interest because it was actually bundled in a pretty good sale on Steam recently. Let's do hit chance here. I'm just trying to grind a few levels before I get absolutely destroyed by something here. But I think this is a decent time to at least talk about how things are going and stuff like that. Let's do pickup strength compared to all, or pickup compared to all those, because I want to move on to other stuff. Because yeah, I've been busy. If you're on the Discord or you've heard from the channel before, this is one of those things where there was a time, once upon a time, where I made a conscious choice. Do I continue to try to push hard into YouTube land because my work was not going too great, but it was finally on an upward trajectory, but so was the YouTubingness. It was a lot easier to actually make money off of YouTube back then, and that was back when I had monetized videos. Yeah, I chose the legal route, running my own business as a law firm, and that may be a little bit surprising, but yeah, it's almost as surprising as all these demons that are actually about to murder me. So that's fun. Let's see if we can figure this out. There's probably want to keep the auto attack on, as we have somebody trying to circle strafe me with the shield. That's rude. And we have our first boss here. Yeah, what that means is that sometimes we get lawyer story time here, and this is going to be one of those days for lawyer story time. Because, as you may know from watching enough television, and television doesn't always lie. Let's see if we can set this guy on fire here. Yep, maybe, possibly, maybe not. But yeah, TV doesn't always lie to you. Sometimes I'm going to die here really bad. Should actually know real quick. My controls, cursor, all of this. This is what this stuff looks like in the game. We just have attack speed, no abilities. So that's one of the kind of weird things that I've learned about this game, is that I'm used to other games kind of throwing you weapons, and this one you kind of got to live first before you get your weapons available. So that's a little weird. But hopefully I can get some health here pretty soon. In fact, I may need to fine. A little tiny bit of health regeneration per second. We're going to run from this and try to move along here. But see, it's fun. I try to talk about what's going on, and then I just end up talking about the game that I'm playing anyway. But it's all good. I just had another trial. It actually took a lot longer than I expected, considering the complications that were involved in the case were largely logistical. The fact pattern for it was actually fairly straightforward. And that's, you don't always hear an attorney say that, but it was a simple case that honestly could have been settled earlier on, but things being as they are, sometimes the state wants to prosecute, and that is what they like to do, and that is fine, especially when you have a victim, which in this case, a healthcare worker, a nurse from the health department, saying, I want these charges pursued. So, and I can talk about this a little bit more now because I'm going to get longer pickup range here. Longer fingers, it's called. But yeah, I can talk about this now because the trial's over. Obviously, what I was talking about before with the TV not lying to you is that there is privileged communication between attorneys and clients, and that's always going to be there, even after the life of the case. But there's nothing wrong with me talking about a trial that's done. In fact, it's good reflective practice. Kind of like me trying to run around and not get murdered by a bunch of poop snails. I don't know what you call these necessarily, but I'm doing almost no damage. This is kind of amazing. But yeah, the trial itself. It was a co-defendant case. When I say that, I mean that I represented one person. There was another defense attorney that represented somebody else. I apparently need more health regen because I'm terrible. I'm real terrible. And that was something that the district attorney is not prepared for because she followed her usual practice, and that's their office's usual practice, that when you have co-defendants, you make a motion to join the trials together. In other words, same fact pattern, having people go in... Ooh, I'm about to die. Having both trials happen at the same time, it means that you don't have to do double the work. It kind of lets evidence try to get in against one that wouldn't necessarily be allowed for the other. So there's some advantages to it, but what the state wasn't prepared for is that this was not a case... unlike some other cases that I have in the queue, ooh, that was near death, where people are trying to dumpster on one or the other. This was a case where actually my client went to the health department to get screened for a pregnancy and ended up getting upset because the health department's policy said that she could not have her mom come back to discuss a blood test result here. And there's some disputed facts with that. I'll give you my client's side of it, is that she had called the walk-in. The health department said walk-in. The state said it was a very specific kind of clinic that has a policy where you can't have a mom go back. My client waived any sort of HIPAA concerns, but the health department was still like, no. Eventually, the supervising nurse came out and kicked out my client and her mom, who was the co-defendant. And now, there's what my client alleged in trial. Wow, these are kind of big and scary here. Versus what happened. Ultimately, my client was charged, and her mom was charged with a felony assault on a healthcare worker. And what the end result was, and this was a win, but don't always ask a defense attorney what a win means. Wow, I'm going to die so bad. I have a second boss while the first boss is out to kill me. You know that's awesome, as we have different attack patterns here as well. It's very exciting. See if I can get that scroll before I die. Ooh, this is... Yep. I just got squished. I gotta double check my controls here. Return to camp. That was kind of my experience with the game so far. Is you know, it's a little vanilla, and maybe a little more vanilla than I like. But yeah. Add the aiming line here. I don't know if I necessarily need it. I'm going to go with the swordsman here. I did so badly I didn't even unlock anything. That's exciting. We're going to go back to the haunted caverns here first. But yeah, where was I before I unceremoniously got absolutely destroyed here? So yeah, we have move, auto attack, toggle auto aim. Now we're fighting skeletons. It's all very exciting. So enjoy the bone sounds while I talk about this, because first rule of oh my god I'm in trouble is I have clients ask me plenty of times like, well, what's your win percentage? That's how you know that somebody's desperate. Never ask a defense attorney what their win percentage is, because you may not like what a win is. And the jury did come back with a guilty verdict against both my client and mom. I did raise self-defense, and because my client said she acted in self-defense, the jury did not believe that. And the jury in that case has to say that, has to prove both beyond a reasonable doubt that there was an assault that took place, and has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did not act in self-defense. It's kind of a two-part rule here. However, my client was charged with felony assault, and was only convicted of misdemeanor simple assault, and that is a win. There is a very legitimate reason to take a case to trial because you were overcharged, and that's where I was saying this is the kind of case that maybe could have been mediated out. And the winning argument for the case, like I said, I gave a little recitation before here, but what the jury eventually said, and it was due to procedural stuff and the jury having to be there a whole extra day than they expected to be. Nobody stayed to talk, unlike the last trial I had, which is totally fine. But I totally understand it. I was sick of being there too. But yeah, the winning argument, and that's one thing you always want to look for as attorney, is where is your win here? Because the state doesn't just have to prove the charge, they have to prove every element of each charge beyond a reasonable doubt. So that an assault occurred and there were no cameras available to show like video of the assault at the health department. So that wasn't there. It was just strictly going off of what people said. There are some witnesses who came rushing in later. They saw things, but my focus was on the very beginning of the incident, where my client was booted out due to the health department's policy. And one of the elements for the charge of assault on a healthcare worker is that the person actually has to be discharging their duties as a healthcare worker at the time. And if there is a place where a jury could have found my client guilty of simple assault, but not guilty of assault on a healthcare worker, it has to be because they didn't think that the state's victim was actually acting as a healthcare worker at a time. And there's a few factors for that, but I think one of the most important things is that sometimes in life you just have to be flexible. Shit does not always work the way you want it to work, and you just have to constantly be adaptable. Like myself and a defense counsel, or co-defense counsel, who is an attorney who's... I'm very excited to have worked with him because I've known him for a very long time, but I've never really talked to him very much, but he is a long-standing member of the local legal community, so that was nice to work with him. I learned a lot just from being over there with him, although I held my own too. Not saying that, but you always try to look to learn more instead of just rest on your laurels here. Let's see if I can actually get an ability here. Phantom Needles, Ring Blade, Lightning Strike. Throws a blade left and right in alteration. Blades act as boomerangs. Fire needles at random enemies. I like Ring Blades. Let's see how that goes. So you actually have to kill a boss to get an ability. That's where things... I apparently did a really bad job before. But that's okay. So... what we have is that the state has to show every element. I kind of lost my train of thought here, which is great because in my closing argument, I actually lost my complete train of thought entirely, but I caught it in time to where nobody like noticed. But I definitely staying there for a second like, oh shit, what am I actually saying right now? I'm going to take a little bit of defense. I normally don't like to do this, but I suck at the game, so it's fine. And maybe I'll go down to that scroll over there and see what I can get after I get a little bit more experience. So let me just rephrase my train of thought and hopefully it'll come back to me. Working with another defense counsel was definitely nice though, because I'm so used to having to go it alone. But we aligned a lot of our strategies together. This is what I was talking about. So you have to be flexible sometimes because our plan was, as part of jury selection, because this case involved healthcare workers and was at the health department, we wanted to make sure that we didn't have anybody who was involved in healthcare be on the jury. And the reason for that is that we didn't want people necessarily because as you're selecting a jury in Superior Court trials in the district where I'm at, it's 12 people. It's not always like that, but it's 12 people where I'm at. You don't always want to have somebody just like the other 11 people in the jury room turn to this person and say, well, tell us what happens. You're trying to build a group dynamic here. So we thought that sort of building the dynamic would involve not necessarily having somebody control the room because they're a nurse. And the prosecuting witness was a nurse, and one of the defendants is a healthcare worker. So it's a lot of stuff. But one of the issues with that is that your expectation versus reality is that the two largest employers in the county are both healthcare providers, and they are competing healthcare providers. So we had two nurses on the jury, which was not the plan. But once again, it answers the question of how in the world can you have somebody convicted of simple assault with a nurse who is booting somebody out, but that nurse not be considered a healthcare worker? It's because one of the things that I focused on in my closing argument was turning around and saying, the state has to show this beyond a reasonable doubt. Co-counsel was like, she was acting like a bouncer, which is a way better word than I would have ever come up with. But yeah, just kicking them out. At that point right there, where she's going from providing healthcare assistance, she wasn't even the original nurse that saw the person. She was just the supervisor that was brought out to clean up the mess here. She was there to enforce the health department's policy. And is that providing healthcare? I mean, she was in a nurse uniform, but clearly the jury did not find beyond a reasonable doubt, or did not find to their full satisfaction, as we have a boss here, it's trying to give me hugs, did not find to their full satisfaction that was acting as a healthcare professional, which is how you can have my client be found not guilty of felony assault. Plus, my exact opening words were, and I'm not going to name my client here because that's a little too identifying. This is all public information that could be looked up, though. Is that, ooh, wow, there's a lot of shit here. Okay, let's do a little more pickup range, try to clean this up. Yeah, on the stand, in her own testimony, the state's victim referred to my client, the defendant, the one who was there for pregnancy screening, not as a patient, not as a client, which, as through my DSS work, I'm very familiar with how the health department, what their policies are for people. She referred to my client as a customer. Like, if you're looking at someone as a customer, are you just trying to build up your numbers for getting enough people through, like, the door or something? Yes, valued customer. That's what we want from our medical places here, and especially at the health department, which they don't exactly have all the money in the world. We get gear in this game. Health capacity, 3 defense, 3 block strength. Let's not receive. Well, let's get the one that we haven't gotten yet, I guess. That's fine. That's totally fine. But yeah, you just got to capitalize on things like that. And this is what I tell my clients all the time, is that this is why you have a trial, because you don't always know what's going to happen. I would have never, ever guessed that a nurse who's sitting there, and she pissed off the jury because she was showing out during the entire trial. My client wasn't great, but she's young, and this is all very tough for her in general because she did end up losing the baby after this incident. So it's a bunch of bad memories for her there, on top of a conviction. But it was a misdemeanor conviction instead of a felony conviction. So, but the jury, especially the 2 nurses, did not like the district attorney going after my client's mom. And I'll get into that in a minute, because my client actually exercised the right to remain silent, which in a criminal defense trial, you don't necessarily know some stuff. I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, I went from being like, oh my God, we have 2. I literally asked a co-counsel at one point, it's like, do we really want 2 nurses on this jury? And I mean, in his, like, in the way he always is, because he's always an even keel kind of guy. It's really, like I said, I've always known this, but it's nice to actually work with him to see it in action. He's like, well, it's going to cut both ways at the end anyway, so we got 1 where we can have 2. So that's kind of how it ended up going. But I went from being, oh crap, the plan didn't work, to yes, hell yes, this is exactly who I want to be hearing this right now. Because you can't always tell what a jury's going to do. I did talk about my previous trial before, where I had the foreman ended up just nodding and enthusiastically listening to what I was saying in close. Sometimes jurors will do that and then will rule against your client anyway, though. It's never a guarantee. But at least here, I hadn't put anyone to sleep, despite the fact that we had closing arguments really late in the day. But yeah, it's like I said, as I said in the War Tales video before, which will have gone up before this one, I'm in the unusual position of kind of being on a winning streak, which, with some of the stuff that I have coming up, I never hang my hat or rest on my laurels and say, that it's going to keep going. But you got to enjoy it while you can and try to reflect on what you can do, because there's always stuff I could do better. I got a little too, like, obviously I won the trial, and I don't think, let's do 10% additional tax. That seems fun. You're never going to be perfect. And I can break myself down a little bit, but I really want to get to one other point, which is that, and I had a conversation about this with another defense attorney afterwards, one who watched some of the trial stuff, is that I worry sometimes about how I'm doing with imposter syndrome and stuff. But the more I do this, the more I'm seeing that my expectations are too high for people sometimes. Like, this was a trial with 2 co-defendants. Now, I'm used to that in DSS court. That happens all the time. Just think about it for a second. In DSS court, where I represent, oftentimes it's parents who've had their kids taken away. Well, there's usually what you have is a mom who's been identified. I've had a few cases without a mom. There's reasons for that, as you can imagine. There may be a dad. There may be multiple dads from multiple kids. There may be multiple dads, and we're going to do Mamma Mia and figure out who's the dad. Those are all things that you have multiple defense attorneys on there, and how that ends up working is very different from what the district attorney and the judge, and let's see here, the district attorney I can live with, but the judge, that's a little bit different, thought how it was supposed to work. Because my client exercised the right to remain silent. She's allowed to do that. She didn't testify. And the reason she did that is because her criminal record would be able to be brought up. And the thing that really sucks about that is that they changed the law recently. And if she had just committed her crimes a few years later, it would have been kept in juvenile court. But Mom had a criminal record that was very old. In my jurisdiction, you can only bring up charges from within the past 10 years. So she could testify without being asked about her criminal record. So, wow, I'm about to die here. Can I get anything for survivability? Not really. Okay, well, let's just see if we can not die then, because these wizard Larrys are giving me problems. There we go. Just try to move to the left and the right every time they do their big thing. But anyway, we have co-defendant case. So, my co-counsel and his client, they go first. And then it's my turn to ask him questions. Wow, all that was just for the damn shield. Okay. They go first. They have an opportunity to go over their stuff. And then I start asking questions. There's 2 types of questions you ask in court. And you may be familiar with this from television. Wow, this is a really annoying thing to walk through. You have, at least this game rewards you for getting movement speed. Unfortunately, I have barely picked up movement speed at all. I'll file that away for later. Then I start asking questions. On direct examination, when you're talking to your own client, you're only allowed to ask, oh, wow, dog is barking. Okay, so my dog got very excited about actual mailman. So that happens here. We're going to do astronomer's orbs this time, because that seems like fun. So where was I after those multiple interruptions here? 2 types of questions. You have when you're talking to your client, you're only allowed to ask open-ended questions. I forgot how to play the game. I thought it was Vampire Survivors, and I was controlling with the mouse, and now I might die as a result. Movement, speed, and health. Yes, please. I actually missed my little boss kill bonus. The other side of it, though, is that you have, when you're on cross-examination, you can ask leading questions. And leading questions means that it's a yes or no question, and you just kind of leave them over there. Did you go to the store? Yes or no. Did you buy cupcakes? Yes or no. Were the cupcakes chocolate? Yes or no. So as soon as I start asking leading questions, the state objects, and I'm just confused. It's like it's a question, and the judge is like, just like, this is cross-examination. You can ask these kind of questions. So I'm like, okay, yes, thank you. I don't have to explain this to the judge. But then I keep asking questions, and then the judge stops me and kicks out the jury and is just like, excuse me, these questions are outside the scope of direct examination. Now, that may sound like a bunch of weird legalese if you're not familiar with how this works. But direct examination is the questions that the defense attorney for my client's mom asked, the one that are already gone, the one who I was asking questions, or the one I was asking leading questions to. And I had to educate the court twice about it, which is very disheartening because I'm clearly not a judge. But to the judge's credit, the judge did listen. I've had judges absolutely ignore me when I have to educate them on stuff like this before. But it's just like, okay, you know, I'm allowed to ask leading questions. I would love it as a defense attorney if I were just limited by the questions that were asked by the first attorney here. And I told the judge, you got to think about it from the prosecutor's perspective here. If I could, as a defense attorney, just not ask about things like my client's criminal record. What if suddenly the state was not allowed to ask questions about my client's criminal record because I didn't ask about them? That's technically what the judge was saying, questions being outside the scope of direct examination. It was a misapplication of the rule. Pretty much what happens in court practice is that everybody goes around in a turn, and then you get what's called redirect examination, and then that redirect examination can only be within the scope of everybody else's cross-examination. In other words, if somebody asks a question, you're allowed to kind of go back to your client and try to clean that up. Okay, let's see if I can survive this. I probably can't. But yeah, it's a very practical but very long-standing rule. And it just goes to show that for all of the like razzle-dazzle you can try to do, and I certainly tried to make sure I moved around the courtroom and made my arguments and everything, one of the things that really won the day for me in court was knowing my procedure, knowing the boring stuff, knowing the regular course of business. Because those are the kind of things that if you don't pay attention to it or let it slide, yes, you can appeal the case, but then the case could be overturned because they're like, well, ineffective assistance of counsel, your attorney didn't do their job. But instead, because I was able to instruct the court properly and be like, I'm allowed to ask not just these questions, but any kind of question I want to, except for one or two that the judge said no to. But typically, just it's open season until we get to redirect, and then on recross, then you're limited by what was said before. So it's like a funnel at that point. Oh, good. I actually lived long enough to get something. So movement speed is fine. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's an interesting trial. And it's always interesting to do trial practice because you learn more stuff about yourself as a practitioner and about kind of where the case can go as well. Because you may have heard me kind of talk about this. I wasn't exactly being tongue-in-cheek earlier. I thought I had some tough trials where I wouldn't be able to get results here. But I have been able to get some very positive results from my clients so far this year. So it's good to see, like, on the scoreboard, not just that I know I've grown as a practitioner, but I need to actually be able to show it. It's nice to actually know, okay, it's actually working. The plan is working. So that's kind of my look from there. That's where I've been busy this past week. There's always more stuff I have to do, and now that school's out for summer and vacation stuff's coming. I think one of my favorite things that you all tell me all the time is just focus on your life. We'll be here. Do what you need to do. And I appreciate that kind of support because you all have been great as viewers and community members, because it's not always easy to just be like, okay, I want to put out all this content, but I just don't have, I have a lot of responsibilities that actually pay bills. Because if you noticed, please tell me if YouTube's starting to advertise on my videos, because I'm sure as hell not advertising on my videos at this point. I don't get enough views to do that, even though I'm almost at 10,000 subs, which is awesome. But I do appreciate you all listening, and I thought this would be an appropriate place to talk shop a little bit about court. It is one of those things, again, where ultimately my client was convicted, but was convicted of what's called a lesser included offense, which I had to argue to get that lesser included instruction in because it's not in there by default for healthcare workers. So that was another thing that I wanted. But at the same time, it's just one of those things where it's like, it still sucks because there's a lot of bad shit that happened, but what's my role as a defense attorney here is to hold the state to task and say, you have to show beyond a reasonable doubt that all this stuff is, and my client wasn't just overcharged. And it ultimately goes back to what my co-counsel said pretty much from the start, which is that this is a case that should have just been in misdemeanor court, and the parties already had a restraining order where they were not allowed to contact each other. They entered into that on their own voluntarily. I'm dead. Oh, I'm not dead. Oh, I'm super dead now. That's fine. Good progress. So it's one of those things where we had to go to felony court and for a trial, and that's the way it is. But hey, an actual like full run, got some more quests that are here, possibly some more unlocks. I'll be honest, just from playing the game a bit more, and I've got just a little bit of time in it. It's definitely not Diablo. I mean, Diablo 4 just came out, and you can have a whole video discussion for Blizzard and what's going on with them. I don't have to. Everyone else does. That's how you get the clickbait roll to grow your channel. But yeah, this game here, Halls of Torment, for what it does, I mean, if you like the kind of Vampire Survivors reverse bullet hell, that was the word I was looking for, then this may be one for you. There's definitely bundles and stuff that are available, but at least it's a little bit of a showcase and a little bit of talk about life. Feel free to put any questions you have in the comments, and I'll let my dog know that he was a good boy because he's actually barking at the mail this time instead of barking at nothing. So thanks for watching. You all are awesome. Keep your loved ones close. See you next time.